MTDB here, bringing you another episode. Today we are going to be doing a batch comparison of the 504 and 505 8582. So why this particular comparison? What about this era of pu'er tea? What about this recipe? Okay, we will get into all of that. So this specific era of pu'er is a really interesting time, specifically for a factory like Munghai Tea Factory. The reform happened in 2004, so this is really their first year past that. And it's kind of a unique year that doesn't look totally like a few years later, and it doesn't look like a few years before either. So they were ramping up quantity, which is something that is just generally true of pu'er during this time period too. The amount of quantity of pu'er produced in 2003, for instance, to pick a year earlier versus something like 2007, it's dramatically different. The pu'er bubble famously burst in 2007, partly because they were responding to the market forces of like increased demand for pu'er tea, and so people were making more and more pu'er. And so you will find pu'er that's relatively inexpensive in 2007 on average versus pu'er that's like relatively more expensive in something like 2003. So we fall kind of right in the middle of that, and in terms of price and quantity, it does kind of fall right in the middle too. The 8582 is probably one of the two famous Munghai Tea Factory raw recipes that are numbered. It is kind of the broadleaf recipe, so compared to something like 7542, it's relatively less punchy and has kind of a broader, thicker, gentler appeal to it. In my opinion, for me at least, it takes a little bit less time for it to be drinkable in terms of aging. A lot of the mid-2000s 7542s are just kind of hitting that spot for me where I can enjoy drinking them. For me at least, the 8582s take a little bit less time to get to that point. So that's another interesting thing about these. It's also more of the broadleaf, so we're talking bigger leaves in general rather than kind of the mid-size grade leaves that 7542 has. So this year in particular is interesting because there were a number of different batches of pu'er. They do the same thing for 7542 of this year, and some are significantly more sought after than others. 8582 is somewhat different than 7542 in the sense that there's not one batch where everyone's like, this is the white cloth strip 7542 501 batch for 7542. Costs magnitudes more than even the 502, which is the next expensive. So there's a dramatic step down in terms of price, as well as, if you talk to some people, quality. In my opinion, I've tried it, and yeah, there's a significant difference between that and some of the later batches for 7542. 8582 has a somewhat different dynamic. The main batches that you will see cited are stuff like 501, 504, and to a lesser extent something like 502. 501 and 504, supposedly, if you actually look at it, were pressed relatively close together. Why they didn't go in order, I don't know. But they were pressed before something like 502. So even though 504 and 505, 505 being the other batch we were testing here, were pressed just technically one batch apart, I think the pressing time was fairly different for that. And 505 is not one of the famed batches, so it is a little bit less sought after. So we are investigating how much does that play a difference here. Anyways, I'm talking a lot. I'm going to talk a bit about the storage of both these teas too as I drink. It is blinded, so I don't know which is which. I've had both these teas a few times, but they're not teas that I've had, for instance, like 6 or 7 even. So they're not teas I know super well. Cheers. Nice rounded body, a lot of wood going on. There's a little bit of tartness too, a very mild bitterness. I gave both these teas a double rinse. We're not focused on the storage here, although they do both have somewhat interesting storage histories. Kind of like a dry apricot wood vibe to that one. Decently thick. Not too juicy, a little bit more on the drying side of things. But I wouldn't say it's so really dry. Cheers. This is stronger, significantly so. It's thicker even than that one. It's kind of, I would say it's borderline pungent. A lot more resinous activity going on here. Well, that is actually a very significant difference in those steeps right there. This one just has a lot more tannins and things like that going on, so I get a little bit of pucker there, but I think it has a more impressive, certainly, strength and upside to it too. So from that, I'm definitely going to guess that this one on the left is 504 and this one on the right is 505, but we will see. Going to make another steep here. So the 504 was stored in Taiwan for a number of years before my friend Toby got it, and Toby is based in Melbourne, Australia, so it was stored there for a number of years too. The 505 had a similar history in the sense that it was stored in Taiwan, and then my buddy Hanji bought it, and it was stored in Reno. So I don't know exactly the amount of years in each different place, but they do, funnily enough, have somewhat interesting storage histories that are not totally dissimilar from one another. 505 is, interestingly, not one that I see mentioned hardly ever, and perhaps that is because it is just a little bit less sought after than the main ones there. When it comes to 8582, the 501 and 504 are usually the highest priced, and sometimes 502 is up there with them too. 501 in my experience has always been a bit gentler, and when I've had the 504 I've been struck by kind of the pungency of it. That being said, when you put it up against some of these more actively punchy recipes like the 7542 or 7742, starts to taste a little more ordinary as it goes. So the color is a little bit deeper of a red here. Certainly possible that they're from different Taiwanese storage too. Smell these too. Woody, active, wild. A little bit more higher toned in the notes there, but less rich of a nose coming off there. So yeah, cheers. It's also worth noting that especially for the main batches of 2005 8582, there's a significant step up in price versus the 2006, and that's a lot of what I'm talking about. The quantity and things like that increased, and hence the quality is going to suffer at least a little bit. So 2006 8582 you can buy for about $100. I think you can get it even cheaper if you search for it on Taobao, but $100 for that versus something like 200 plus for some of these sought after batches. Cheers. Really showing off its strength today. Really, I'd be very surprised if that is not the 504. It has, on the surface level at least, some of the same base flavor notes. I get a little bit of that dry apricot thing. It just has a lot more activity. There's more texture, there's more mouthfeels and things like that. Yeah, in some ways this feels significantly less ready to drink, just because of the overall tannins working on the mouth. It's all converting into sweetness. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. It could honestly use a bit more time. I'm gonna drink this, then we'll do the reveal here. I would definitely say that one of these teas is showing up the other one so far. Cheers. Yeah, it's not bad. It's just so less active. And I would say the difference between these two is quite extreme. I can sort of tell that these are both 8582. They both have a similarly big, broad body to it, but the activity and stuff like that is dramatically different on what they are doing in the mouth. This one is just so gentle in comparison. Okay, maybe we'll do the reveal. And yep, sure enough, this is 505, meaning this is 504. That was a lot more of an obvious comparison than I thought it would be. So that's really interesting to see. In this case, I think batches really do matter. I think in other cases it matters a lot less. So I do kind of understand why something like the 504 is priced potentially the way it is. I think this 505 probably is, similar or better than the 2006 8582. but I do think these 2005s are the good batches, at least, do have some interesting things going on for sure. So if you have tried some of these 2005s, let me know. I'd definitely be curious to hear people's opinions. The 2008 is another interesting one to try. That one is significantly cheaper, but I think also it has some fun activity going on. I think that the value of that one is quite excellent for what it brings to the table. I do like both these teas too. I would say they both get positive remarks, just one is dramatically more impressive than the other. So thank you all for tuning in. Let me know how you like this episode. I will see you all next time. Cheers.